writers can, you know, not just some, but is there a possibility of getting a full-time, becoming a full-time writer?
I don't think it's desirable, because if you're writing in a garret and you're isolated from people who are living more ordinary, less rarefied lives, then what are you going to write about? You know, it won't chime with the audience, I don't think. I don't think it's desirable, and I don't think it will happen.
No, I actually wouldn't want to write full-time. I enjoy reading other people's work for a living, and I don't know, if I had that option, I'd want to be out and about and seeing what was going on in the world, rather than being stuck in a room writing constantly. Yeah, that could have a negative effect on your writing.
I definitely agree, but I would really like to earn enough money just to be comfortable and not have to worry about money. That would be wonderful. But again, you have to keep taking stuff in. If you close yourself off from readers, from the world, what are you doing?
So in the digital era, when everything is becoming smaller and smaller, including literature, people do not like to read extremely large books. How do you look at the future of writing and the future of the novel in particular?
How long is Ducks Newburyport? That's enormous. It's enormous. So, and it's just won a prize in the UK. It's big fat books. So I think that's a kind of a myth that, I mean, attention spans are getting smaller and we're all digifying. You know, I think that's happening, but also there is a love of literature that you know, that invites, it works as long as they need to be. So I think, you know, we can rest easy. You just write what you've got to write, however long or short that might be. That's what I think.
So if I ask you who your favorite writer of all time is, who would it be?
Toni Morrison.
Really great choice. I was going to say that. Toni Morrison is just... there's no words to describe her. I was just trying to think, like, what's the highest form of praise in one word I could give her? And you just can't. There's so much in her work and such balance of really strong plots and feeling like you're learning and connecting with the world, and also just beautiful sentences, right?
Beautiful language.
On my bookshelf, I have several totems, you know, books that I keep that are my favourite writers. Toni Morrison is among them. But I think, you know, it's sometimes that changes according to where you are in your writing process. And at the moment, I'm revisiting D.H. Lawrence, who I know is much maligned, and some feminists really have a problem with him. But my God, that man, he can write about nature and humanity in a way that very few writers, I think, can, and that's chiming with me at the moment, according to what I'm trying to write myself. So it, you know, who your touchstones are for writing, I think it depends on where society is and where you are in society and where you are in your writing process.
Two of you teach creative writing at universities. How does the creative writing program help young writers, you know, get better at their writing? Because it's not a very common course in India.
Oh, well, as part of the course, I set texts that I think will benefit younger writers who are starting out. And I think I choose things that perhaps, especially most of my students are from Glasgow, it exposes them to something different. And I think that's what university is for generally, to show you new things that you would never find from your own milieu. And I just try and encourage them to read attentively, to understand what a story is doing, not in a English literature way, but in a, almost like becoming engineers of the story, just to understand how to do that.
In the UK, creative writing degrees are a growth area. There's a lot of universities establishing new creative writing modules. And a couple of years ago, there was a big stink because Hanif Qureshi said that creative writing couldn't be taught. And I think there are things that can't be taught, which is the daily discipline or the desire, but there are also really straightforward, practical, technical skills that can be taught and that we are probably still learning ourselves. They're not taught in one session because it takes you years to understand why that craft might be applicable to this or that scene that you might be writing, or this or that structure might suit this or that narrative. But those are technical skills, like Helen says, that are a bit like engineering. They're to do with the craft of writing, and you can easily expose student writers to those. technical skills, I think.
The theme for our festival this year is shrinking spaces and transcending letters. Do you really feel that writers are faced with shrinking spaces in the world?
We are in the UK. I mean, we've shrunk, so we no longer belong to Europe, so that's a shrinking space, but writers will transcend crap politics, with their letters.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Should we start taking questions from the audience now? Do we still have time? We have 10 minutes more, I think. Okay. Would you like to read a story from your book?
I won't read a whole story from my book. Maybe I'll read the opening of one called The Mermaid and the Tick. I'm choosing this because the kind of short story is a form maybe that dictates the tone of its narrative in a way that I hadn't expected. So this one kind of... Do we want to hear a story from me? Should we talk more about shrinking spaces?
Certainly.
Yeah? Okay. So The Mermaid and the Tick. A husband and wife lived by the sea. He was a handyman and she was a baker. Every day after her baking was done, the wife would go down to the beach for a swim. In summer, she lay on the shingle to dry off in the sun, and in winter, she played chicken with the waves. Her husband joked that she was part mermaid, she loved the sea so much. One day, the husband told his wife he had booked them a holiday. I thought it'd be nice to go away before the baby comes, he said. The 10-day holiday would be in Italy. The husband showed the wife a map of where they were going. It's quite far from the sea, the wife said. There's a pool where we're staying, he told her. The husband didn't like the beach. The pebbles hurt his feet, and he had never learned to swim. I chose to read that one just because I was interested in how those archetypes, husband and wife, kind of crept into my writing in a way that, I hadn't anticipated. And once I realised I was writing a kind of fable or a fairy story, kind of cottages and forests emerged. So I'm interested to think about how the form of a short story can almost dictate the content. And somebody asked me again, why am I writing from the husband's point of view? That story then emerges as a male narrative, a man's problem with his pregnant wife. And again, I thought it was important to occasionally offer the way in which women are perceived in the world as much as the way women are perceiving.
So how would you get into the character when you're writing, and how would you choose the setting of the story?
Anybody else want to answer that? I think it's a kind of, again, because I came from a playwriting background, I think sometimes Lem Sissay yesterday talked about an almost kind of trance-like state. He didn't describe it like that, but he talked about a kind of a state in which we are being creative around this identity we have that is separate from the clowning and from the performance. And it's almost like a trance-like state that I think we occupy when we write. And in that kind of state, when you're in the zone, it's very easy to inhabit any character, which is why, tying this neatly back to your theme, it doesn't matter how much, spaces shrink, how much, politicians will kind of, constrain us, because actually we can go anywhere in our imaginations, anywhere in our creative practice. That's how we transcend rubbish politics or, citizen amendment acts or whatever it might be. We can transcend that through our imagination and through inhabiting other roles and other lives. What was your question? About place as well. How do we choose the place? Any answers? Place in Mermaid and the Tick was archetypal. It's a forest, and so it can be any forest. It can be the forest of a fairy tale. It can be the forest of your dreams. It can be, a real forest.
So have you ever had to face censorship in your writing? Because at the moment, all over the world, writers are facing this problem where they're afraid to write openly for fear of persecution. It may not be like that in the UK, but certainly elsewhere in the world, writers are facing that. Do you ever fear that such a time will come to you as well?
I think it's hard to predict the future. And I think in the UK we're quite lucky in terms of that you're allowed to do certain things, but the other side of it is, are you going to get published? And I worry about what voices are being left out and what I'm not aware of. I think that's a huge issue. Especially up until recently, you know, LGBT people, minority people had real struggle getting published and taken seriously. And I think that is something that I consider, what are we not hearing that's just being sort of, just left behind, not forcibly closed off?
I think fear of censorship can be, I mean, nobody's going to censor us because we're not important enough, you know, so hey, it's fine to be small independent press because we can write what we like, and that's important. We're writing our best material when we're writing what we like. And I do some work with a short story writer called Claire Keegan, and one of her teaching points is that, you know, when you're scared to write this because it might offend someone, that's where the gold is. You know, when you're scared to write because it feels awkward and you're not really sure how somebody's going to take this, or a character seems dangerous in some way, that's where the gold is. You know you're on fire when you're a little bit nervous about what you're producing. So yeah, good that we're only tiny writers that need to work in cinemas and teach and kind of edit other people's work, because, you know, we're able to be free in that way to write what we want to write. No one might read it, of course, but that's another issue.
Rachel, I read online that you were working on a rockumentary. Can you tell us?
Oh, no, the rockumentary came out like about 10 years ago. It was a book, you know, it wasn't a documentary, it was actually a book called Dial M for Merthyr. It was about the rock scene in Wales, emo bands in Wales back in 2008, 2009.
Okay. How do you, this is for all three of you, how do you look past stereotypes when you're writing?
Base your characters on people that you know, because no one is a stereotype. You know, if we're listening to how people speak and we're responding to people in, you know, face-to-face, embodied experience, then you're not going to write a stereotype. You know, that.
Yeah, and stereotypes don't cut it in theatre, because once you've written a play, the actors, if you write a stereotypical character, the actor will smash it to pieces. Like they won't accept it. They'll turn it into something 3D. So you learn to do that then in prose as well.
How do you avoid stereotypes? I think when you're just off in your room writing prose that no one's going to enact, I think you try and be as empathetic as you can. So that's on your end. And then when it's exposed to editors, you want to have an editor who can stand up to you and who will give you a fresh perspective, will not allow you to get away with, you know, mistakes, because that's the way, what stereotype really is in writing is a mistake, and so that needs fixed, and you need someone to show you.
You have worked with Meena Kandasamy you were a panelist at the Edinburgh Festival. Do you regularly read Indian writers?
Shamefully, no, but my plan after this session is to go straight to the bookshop. I've been collecting a list of names. It's one of the reasons these festivals are so important. They expose you to new writers, and I have a list of names. I'm going to buy their books, take them home with me, because really Mina's one of the few that I've read, and that's terrible.
What form of literature do you think is gaining popularity now, and what do you think is losing its significance?
Oh. Well, online you get a lot of short stories, and I think there is a bit of a boom in short stories. I think to say something loses its, you know, kind of day in the sun, I don't think that really happens with literature. I think the word novel means new, so there's always new things coming there, and I think it's just a constantly churning thing, especially in this large world where we're all connected and we can kind of access different forms from different places.
Yeah, I don't think anything is becoming more fashionable or anything becoming less fashionable. Everybody talks about the short story boom, but I think short stories have always been popular. They've always been there.
Similarly, people are always talking about the death of the novel, and then, you know, the novel would just keep on going because people want to read it, people want to write it. I think in the UK there's quite an interest in the blurring of boundaries between fact and fiction. So there's a lot of writers, particularly female writers, who are writing on the borders of autobiography and novels. And the idea, and again, there have been sessions at this festival about the idea of how you represent this experience on the page. Because I teach life writing, and I've tried to write autobiographically, but as soon as you say, I sat on a sofa with a microphone, as soon as you write that down, it becomes something else. The I is something else. It's the she clown. This is a performance. This isn't what I know as I. So I think writers are responding to the gap between those two things in really interesting ways. So UK writers, I'm not so sure about else. American writers as well.
So do we have an identity crisis in that sense?
I don't think writers have an identity crisis. Our politicians might have an identity crisis, which is why they're so keen to, wave the nationalist flag or, their religious flag or whatever it might be. But writers we're always in identity crisis, aren't we? That's why we write. So, we're happy with our identity crisis. We're creative about it, what's more.
F. Scott Fitzgerald said, and he's not a nice man, but he said this, that every writer is a group of people pretending to be one person. And I think that's true. I think with him it was maybe a group of really annoying people pretending to be one person. So there's a sense of plurality that you have to engage with.
All right. So
sorry to interrupt. With that, can we open the floor to the audience to ask any questions, if any? Yes, we have one question over there.
Good day. Have you used drugs during the writings, and what do you think about the writers who use them in this process? And is it fair to use drugs in literature? Drugs like
Drugs or drafts?
No, drugs.
Drugs?
Yeah.
As in hallucinogenic drugs? I tried it once. I thought, all these famous men writers, they're writing when they're drunk as lords. So I'll take an ecstasy pill and see what happens. Or, and I also tried it drinking as well. Rubbish. But I'm used to writing, as Rachel says, the first draft of anything tends to be, Hemingway said, it has to be a shitty first draft. That's what Hemingway said. And so, maybe it was just a shitty first draft, but actually I think it was more shitty than normal when I was drunk or on drugs.
I took drugs for recreation when I was younger, but for fun, not for writing. I can't think of anything worse than writing on drugs.
I did purposely get drunk for one of the stories in here. I'm not going to say which one in case you want to have a guess later on. And it was interesting because I drank half a bottle of whiskey, which was quite a lot. And I wrote it, and then I edited it while drunk and didn't touch it again, and nobody seemed to notice. Maybe that says something really bad about my writing. I haven't done it again since because I don't see the point. If you're an imaginative person anyway, maybe it lowers your inhibitions, but yeah, you can just do it.
Also, I think writing is a very disciplined activity. I bring a discipline like I would bring a discipline to yoga, or like I would bring a discipline to, as you were saying, a piece of engineering. If I'm making a train, a train locomotive engine when I'm pissed, then that's not going to be safe. It's not going to transport the passenger. Similarly, if I'm writing and I'm out of control, I'm not going to be taking responsibility for my reader's journey, Do you like that metaphor? I'm a writer,
Can I also ask a question? Being a writer, all of you are writers, of course, has the register been something limiting, or do you feel, as a writer in English, do you feel multiple language and the influences, those languages influencing your register as individual writers?
So I'm from Scotland, and in Scotland there are 3 languages. There's English, Scots, and Gaelic. And while I don't speak Gaelic, I did grow up in the Gaelic-speaking area, and I think its cadences are something that haven't really left me. And I think with Scots, it's very class-based, whether you can speak it and who you speak it with, and it's kind of, you have to code switch a little bit. When I have written in Scots, just a little bit of Scots here and there, I have had pushback from editors who are like, this is incorrect. This is not standard English. But I was an English teacher for many years, and my opinion is there are many Englishes, and they all take from where they are and from each other.
And I have quite a few Indian students over the years, and so sometimes they are using non-English words in their writing and then translating them, and I'm encouraging them to keep those words in so that it becomes a language of its own, the story, and so it provides that texture. And then actually work the other way. In one of my stories, there are some Urdu words, and I had to go and find those out, because I don't speak Urdu, but I needed to find those out. So I think when you have Italian students, again, who are an Argentinian student who are bringing their languages into the English language that they're writing in order to create a kind of texture. So I think that can be really exciting. So I don't find it confining, because you can always go outside the English language. It's not the only language, as we well know.
Yeah. So similarly, I don't speak Welsh, but I do as much as I can to make sure Welsh exists in my writing world. So I write some of the characters like speaking Welsh dialect, and the language is never very far away. So.
I think with that, we will wind up this session, as we are running also short of time. So I'd like to personally thank all four of you for giving us such an enriching session. And I would also, on behalf of Madhubhumi, request Rachel Tracis to present Helena McCordy with a memento from our side. And inviting a loud cheer from the audience as well, since it's the morning. Thank you one and all, and thank you, dear speakers. We'll be beginning our next session shortly, which is a poetry reading.